The Truth About Goblins. Chapter 52. Out of the way! Kit dived past a herd of strangers and onto the next street. Get out of the way! Yang was struggling to keep by his side, the flow of the crowd dragging him back. Jack, there's too many we're running out of time. He refused to slow down. We can't. Jack! A stray elbow collided with his skull, sending Kit to the ground. People were running everywhere, in every direction. Panic, confusion. The lights overhead flickered as the ground beneath them started shaking. Yang ignored the tremors and yanked Kit to his feet. One more second and they both would have been trampled. The two escaped to the street, taking refuge in a narrow alley while they caught their breath. You okay? Yang eyed a streak of blood on Kit's forehead. I'm fine. He pushed him away and stood up. His bruised legs were aching, his arms cried out for rest, but pain was the furthest thing from his mind. We've got to get to those pumps. Yang looked towards the frantic crowd. Can't push by this many people. We won't. A jolt, a tremor. The earth shifted beneath them. They fell to the ground as cries from the crowd intensified. There was screaming and yelling, and then another sound. Like lightning, they heard a crack. It echoed across the cavern before fading away. There was more screaming as it was followed by thunder. The shaking had stopped, but the screaming was louder. Kit scrambled out the alley. What happened? What was... Yang pulled him back, both of them cowering against the wall as a wave of dust and dirt rushed past them. When they opened their eyes, they looked to each other, their faces blank. Where was it? Said Kit, sprinting onto the street. It was impossible to see past the throng, but he couldn't stop himself from searching. Was it the tunnels? Sounded like Main Street, said Yang, though he was unsure. Maybe one of the pumps. No. Kit whirled around. A cold sweat gripped his body. He covered his face with shaking hands. He had to calm down. He had to think. Main Street. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. There were 2 pumps on Main Street. If part of the cave collapsed, we won't be able to get to them. What about the, Yang could barely speak. The other 2. The poison apple. Another deep breath. He opened his eyes. The ace of clubs. More screaming. Everyone in the market had to know what was going on by now. The streets were growing more chaotic by the second. It was time to make a decision. Kit turned to Yang. Get Saphira. Get her to the tunnels. Make sure she gets out. His eyes went wide. But the pump. I thought Bellator. He's not going to make it in time. The words had come out all on their own. It caught both of them off guard. Kit staggered forward and grabbed Yang's shoulders. Get her out of here. Save Saphira. He pulled him closer, his voice caught in his throat. Please, Yang, get her out for me. He stared. We can't just... Please. He released him and turned the other way, already running. Tears clouded his vision as he fought his way through the street against the throng of people heading the other way. His chest felt heavy. The dirt and dust choked him as he gasped for air. He had to get to the ace of clubs. He had to shut down the pump, if only to buy time for Saphira to escape. He ducked down another alley, the crowds thinning as he ran further from the gates and any hope of survival they promised. But he didn't think about it. He didn't let himself think about anything else besides running. The ace of clubs loomed before him. Just like before, he headed for the emergency exit and bolted up the steps, slowing down only when the little window was above him. It was still open. He jumped up and swung his leg over to the other side. And then he was on the steps, the main floor, running across the stage. The pump was in the basement. There were lights along the way. The club's generator was still working. It was tempting to think that the chaos outside was something from a nightmare, that the cave-in had been imagined, that the collapse wasn't coming after all. But even as he descended the steps to the basement, the ground continued to shake. The silence of the club was a false comfort. Now in the basement, Kit looked around. The lights were on. Someone had come in before him. None of this mattered. He went straight for the door at the opposite end. The water pump could be heard in the next room. He seized the handle and forced it down. The heavy door swung open, and then he stopped. "What are you doing?" A kid, hooded, knelt before the pump, a mess of tools scattered across the floor. The stranger jumped as Kit entered. "Jack?" She pulled her hood back. "What are you doing here?" He stared at her. "Yin!" He ran forward. "You've got to stop. The market's collapsing. There's earthquakes and everyone's running and... Whoa, slow down. What are you... The pumps." He spun her around and pointed to the contraption in the corner. 7 of them, all rigged to make a quake that'll bury us alive. "What the... No!" She looked at him, and then to the pump. "They didn't say... They told me..." But understanding came quickly. "Oh no. Oh hell no." A sound from the pump, whistling, boiling. Under stress, it started rattling. The two backed away towards the door. "You gotta make it stop." Kit ducked as steam blasted over his head. "Turn it off." Yin was back on her knees. "I can't." The noise grew louder. The pump gave a jolt. "It's too hot. I need to..." Her words trailed off into silence. She turned to him and stared. "I'm sorry, Jack." He saw her reach out. "What?" She threw him back through the doorway. "Yin!" He jumped to his feet. The door was closed. He lunged for the handle, but it was too late. She had shut him out. There was only a small window, square, thick glass. He stood on his toes and looked inside. "Yin!" He saw her at the pump, but couldn't see what she was doing. "Open the door!" She ignored him. With her back to the door, she reached forward with both hands and approached the pump. The metal was hot, scalding, but she continued. "What are you doing?" She didn't slow down. A moment later, and her hands were on the pump. Kit watched, expecting her to leap back from the burning metal. But she only stood there, hands before her, refusing to move. And then he saw steam. It seemed to be pouring out from the pump, thick, heavy. But it wasn't coming from the pump at all. And as the cloud fell to the floor, he knew it wasn't steam. Stunned, he could only watch. The fog filled the room, covering every inch of the floor. The air was thick with it. Yin's figure was fading from sight. "What's happening?" He pounded on the door, but it stayed locked. "Yin, what are you doing?" The steam rose to the door's window. He tried to keep Yin in sight, but something was happening to the glass. A pattern etched itself onto the surface, spinning and weaving until the window was covered. Kit didn't understand what he was seeing. Not until he felt it, not until he was forced to draw his hands away from the door. The metal was freezing. The window was covered in frost. He stepped back, staring at the door in confusion. Yin was inside, behind that door. But what was she doing? Footsteps, quick, coming down the stairs. Kit whirled around. It was Yang, his sweater drenched in sweat, his eyes wider than ever. Another cave-in, he panted. I couldn't get to the... His eyes wandered to the door. Jack? The pump. He gripped his own hair and turned to the door. She's... A cry. Yin's. Yang froze where he stood. Jack? He turned back to him, afraid. There was a wild look in Yang's eyes. She was doing something. Where is she? He pushed past Kit and headed for the door. Where's my sister? I don't know what she's doing. He came up behind Yang, panicking. She had her hands on the pump, but Back! He grabbed a handful of Kit's shirt and threw him to the ground. He fell hard. The force of the throw was more than he could have expected from Yang. He got to his knees, ready to jump back into action, but he looked up. And then he couldn't move. Something was wrong. Whoever was at the door wasn't Yang. His skin was hot, red, his hair white, burning with energy. The dark eyes were gone, replaced by blank, fiery pits. And this creature was surrounded by heat. Strange, unnatural heat that seared the very air. Yang reached for the door, his hand nothing more than a red and white streak, melting the cool metal where it stood. No longer an obstacle, the door gave way to the glowing mass of fire as Yang stepped into the blizzard. And Kit, still on his knees, could only watch. It was another long moment before he got to his feet. Yang? Yang! Was that you? His legs were shaking, his whole body was shaking, and ice was spilling into the room from the open door. Dazed, he staggered forward. Someone grabbed his arm. Don't touch it! He looked first at the hand and then to the face. Mikau? What are you... It's not ice! His eyes were on the open doorway, the frost slowly working its way towards them. Don't touch it! Whatever magic it was, Yang did not fear it. While the others stayed behind, he surged ahead, right into the heart of the blizzard. His skin had lost its red color, a deathly pallor of heat gripped his body. The clothes on his back were melting onto his skin, turned to sickly rags strung about his shoulders. His feet melted the floor, the ice and the frost doing little to slow the power's consumption. The heat, the white fire, drew all it could from him as he pressed through the cold. But he only burned brighter as he looked ahead. He crossed the room and fell to his knees, drained by his magic. The fire took no heed of him. He continued to burn, to draw energy as his life hung in the balance. With what strength he had left, he reached for the figure before him. Nadia. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pulling her close. Nadia, please. Her face was blank, her eyes open but empty. Her skin like stone, her hair white like his, but frozen stiff. She wasn't moving, and her body was colder than ice. He took her brittle hands in his, surrounding her with his heat. Nadia, I'm sorry, I couldn't. His life was fading too. He laid his head on hers. I only wanted to keep you safe. The energy left his body. The light left with it. All the pain was gone now, all the worry and fear. The sound of his own cries were too distant for him to hear. The world went quiet. Aiden. But there was a voice. Aiden, please. He saw a face, white like marble, like diamond. I'm so sorry, I'm sorry. He felt her hand on his cheek, cold, soft. It felt so good. They said they would hurt you. Tears like sapphire on her cheeks, eyes that could have been stars. Nadia. More tears. She started crying. Aiden! Stop, I don't like it when you You're crying too. But she was smiling. Are you okay? He looked up at her, his head on her lap. I thought I was taking care of you. I thought I was taking care of you. The color in her cheeks was returning, her hair growing dark again. I was so stupid. He managed to smile back. We both were, I guess. The magic was leaving him. You should have told me. Aiden. She sounded frustrated, but she hugged him tight. You could have told me, too. I'm your big sister. She buried her face in his shoulder. And you're my little brother, so I'm going to take care of you now, okay? He felt the strength return to his arms and hugged her back. Okay. They stayed that way a long time, holding each other. The walls were covered in ice, the pump incapacitated, the floor streaked with fiery footprints. The earth shook beneath them, but not nearly so violent as it had before. Two others stood in the doorway, too stunned to speak. Whatever they had seen couldn't be explained, at least, not to them. They could only watch, relieved to see that the twins were safe, and amazed to find they were all still alive. Hey, hi, I'm your narrator, Miranda Eastwood, also the author of The Truth About Goblins. If you liked this chapter, remember to add, follow, or subscribe to this channel so you can hear the next one. And if you didn't like this chapter, oh well, I can't really do anything about that. In any case, I just thought I'd let you know about my Patreon. You can check it out if you'd like to throw some support my way. It would mean a lot to me. Not to mention there's loads of extra exclusive content that I only post on Patreon. While I'm at it, I'll mention that The Truth About Goblins is now available as a complete audiobook, and you can get it wherever you get your audiobooks. Thanks for listening.